a couple of examples that I can show you at the end. And I have plenty of time, I think, for um, questions at the end. Mohammed, how much time do I have?
I mean, usually we say like an hour. So,
That's more than enough.
yeah.
More than enough. Okay. Okay, very good. There's my contact information and my email, and it'll be at the end of the presentation as well. So next screen, please. So a few beginning tips for a resume is, of course, you want it to be clear and well organized. A lot of resumes are not studied real carefully. They are more skimmed for the quick information that they want, especially the most important things. For example, you might have on your resume a section about uh, clinical activities. Well, a lot of times eyes will go right to that. So you're going to be clear and well organized with bold and underline, use bold and underline so it sets the sections off. You're going to be careful that it has no mistakes, that it represents you well. It's real easy when you do your own resume and you edit it numerous times. It's real easy to read right over a mistake. So be sure and get someone else to look it over as well. The sections in general, it always starts with your name and your contact information, and you're still students, so education is always next. And then after that, it's usually the most important section to the least. You know, what's the most important things you want them to know about you? So we'll see that in some of the examples. Some people use templates for writing a resume. Um, I tend not to like those because they're a little bit more restrictive, especially when editing things. So I think it's really easy just to use Word or something like that. So just the key being whatever you use, just be sure that it's really easy to edit and format. And the other thing is you want to be consistent, start to finish, with the format, the punctuation, the bold, the underline, italics, whatever you use. Next one, please. We do have in the Career Development Center a career guide. So, and it has some resume examples in there. It also has some information about writing a resume. So you may want to look at that. There's the link, but it's real easy to just search it, the NCSU Career Guide, and you can come up with it. And the Career Guide is not only about resume writing, it's also about doing a job search, interview tips, all the basic kinds of things that people do when they're doing their job search. Next one, please. So here are some basic sections to think about when you're doing a resume. And these are, you know, they're modified by everyone. There's not any one right way of doing it. So first of all, the objective. That is optional. Usually for a resume for a professional school like medical school, usually an objective is not used. It's more used when someone's going for a job. So for example, let's say that you're seeking a summer internship. Then you might want to put an objective in there that's very specific, because objectives are only good, only helpful if they're specific. If it's general, it really doesn't tell them anything. So if you're seeking a summer internship in the health professions, maybe even more specific like that, that's something to consider that lets them know right away why you're sending them a resume. So of course you have your name and your contact information at the top, then your education, and I'll show some examples. And it would include NC State and any other colleges that you've been to. Wake Tech, any other colleges, universities where you've taken some classes. So it's important to include everything for your college classes. And then usually people also they always include their major and a minor if they have one. Sometimes people will include their GPA if they feel good about it. For job search purposes, most people put their GPA on there if it's over a 3.0. And for professional school, it's optional, but usually people going for a medical school have a good GPA anyway. And so it's fine to put it on there. And then you'll have the dates that you've attended, NC State and any other colleges and universities. And we'll look at some examples. Then work experience. Sometimes people have 2 or 3 different jobs just to, of course, make some money, just to keep going, pay some basic expenses. It's good to show that you've worked in different places with different people. You have some maturity, some work maturity is what I mean. Um, Next is clinical experience. So of course, any pre-med students wants to have that clearly stated in there. And it should include everything. If someone has been a medical assistant, an EMT, um, CNA kinds of work, shadowing, volunteering at a hospital, volunteering at a medical clinic. You want to include everything. Sometimes when I'm looking over resumes with students, they'll leave off some things that they didn't spend a lot of time on. So let's say, for example, someone has only 10 hours of shadowing. It's not much, but it's helpful. Everything is good, everything counts. So medical schools look for depth and breadth of experience. So you want to show all the variety of things you've done, of course, as well as things that you've spent some time on, you have some depth. Leadership and activities are another category. For example, Mohammed is president of the pre-med club. So of course that would be on his resume, right? So, and you don't have to be president. You can be vice president, you can be treasurer of the pre-med club, but it also could be any other kind of club. It doesn't matter. It shows some leadership that you had an active role. They respect when students take an active role. So it can be anything. It could be the ballroom dancing club. It doesn't matter. Something where you organize people, organize events, bring in speakers, maybe do some fundraising, all those kinds of things are well respected. And then just whatever kinds of activities that you're involved in. So it can be, things that are clinically related, but mostly that would be in the clinical experience. But other kinds of activities, for example, tutoring, tutoring students at the Boys and Girls Club is outstanding because you're helping others. It can be, I had a pre-med student who was a peer advisor. He coached kids basketball for several years. He really enjoyed it. So that's a good, helpful activity. So any kinds of things that you're involved in, they like to know that students are well-rounded, involved in different things, have a life besides just studying and getting clinical experience, which is not easy to do, right? There's only so many hours in the day, but they like that and they respect it. And of course, any honors and awards you may have. And a lot of the pre-med students have various kinds of honors and awards, whether it's Dean's List or something else. And as far as awards go, I was thinking mostly in this category, mostly the education related ones, because if you have something in work experience that's an award, like you were employee of the month or whatever, then that would probably go best in the work experience category when you have a position where you worked at wherever, Harris Teeter, and you were employee of the month. It'd be good to show that. And also in work experience, that reminds me that you want to have a good basic description of what you did. And if you ever have any accomplishments, be sure and include it. They can be individual or as a team. Maybe you worked at a store and the bookstore, and you helped increase sales 10% over the previous year. Well, you didn't do it by yourself, but you can state it in a way that you were part of a team effort. Everybody works in teams. So that's good to show in the work experience. And also when you're describing your work experience, it's really good to use action verbs when you start your descriptions: produced, directed, developed, all those kinds of things. What you don't want to do is say, I produced, I developed, I created, those kinds of things. And also be careful not to use too much responsible for. Nothing wrong with using that. You just don't want to use it over and over. Another category is research. A lot of pre-med students have research. So it's good to show that you have some involvement. Keep in mind that research is not required. Sometimes people think it really is. I was talking to the director of admissions at the UNC School of Medicine last year. We talk every year, keeping up to date. We're in the middle of talking about what's going on and updates. And right in the middle of the talking, she just stops and looks at me and says, Ray, why does everyone still think you have to have research? You don't. It's optional. So I want people to know that it's really good, it's really helpful, but it's not required. Another one I have at the bottom is projects. And for projects, I'll get back to the questions in a moment. For projects, sometimes people spend a lot of time on something. Maybe it's part of a class, maybe it's even something outside of class, but you spend a lot of time out of a normal paper or something like that. It shows some depth that you've learned a lot. So it's good to show those kinds of projects and include it on there. Was that the last one, Mohammed, projects on that slide?
There's skills and certifications.
Okay, I don't see that. So skills and certifications. So of course, whatever skills you develop and you get training for, you want to include on there. Obvious certifications would be EMT, CNA, things like that. So phlebotomy, anything that you can think of is really helpful. And it helps, especially when it's tougher to get positions, but it's always a challenge. Those certifications can really help, can really make a difference. It can help move you to the front of the line sometimes of being considered for a position. So I saw the question briefly. What was it? High school?
Samuel asked, "Are high school department awards
Yeah, I see.
appropriate?"
Yeah, I see now. Generally, after your first year of college, the answer is no, but if it's something really outstanding, it's worth considering. So it's a judgment call. So if you're not sure, you can always check with me. Samuel, do you want to say what the award is? It's up to you. If you don't, you can just reach out to me
Yeah.
later through my email.
Okay. It was just a physics department award. And
Okay.
yeah, as a senior.
So tell me more. What else was it? What else about it?
That's really all it was. It was just for, I guess they gave one student the award from the several classes that were taught in the physics department. And so at the end of the semester, if you showed excellence, I guess they gave it to one student.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say most of the time people do not, or something like that. That doesn't mean you cannot include it. So anyway, yeah, there's not a right or wrong here, but I'm just trying to give you some general guidelines.
Yeah.
Okay, next one, please. Okay, for the education, so I mentioned some of this. I mentioned all these things, and we'll look over an example. Does anyone have any questions about education category?
So you said we would include any even community colleges that we took even just a few classes at?
That's right. That's right. And you don't have to go in great detail. Let's say somebody went to Wake Tech for one summer. You could just put on there, Wake Tech Community College summer 2019. It could be as simple as that. Because when you apply to medical school, they're going to see your transcripts. You're going to turn them in for NC State and everywhere else you went. So you don't need detail. You just need to show that you went there, and that's part of your education. Okay, thank you. So for the experience, so of course you put the employer name and then your job title, even if it's just volunteer. You put it on there. You have the dates that you worked. Put a good description of what you did. You want to give them a good basic idea. It doesn't need to be in great detail, but it's helpful to have some kind of a description. Depending on what you did, if you were a server at a restaurant, you don't need a lot of information, right? If you did that, maybe even just one line or two. But if you were a medical assistant in a doctor's office for 6 months, you want to put several lines of what you did. So you want to give them a good basic idea, especially of the things that are the most relevant and most helpful. I mentioned these other things. Generally for education, you have two choices. For experience. It's reverse chronological order, most recent to going back in time. And then the other option is most important experience to least important. So let's say you worked most recently as a server at a restaurant, but before that, you had a summer internship at a medical clinic, like the Urban Ministries Medical Clinic, and you did a lot. You were full-time for 10 weeks. Well, I would put that experience first before I would put the server, if they're in the same experience category. But like I said before, most of the time people break it up. So you have that option, reverse chronological order or most important section to least. Okay, next, please. And before we, I also want to ask, was there any questions about work experience?
Would you say that you prefer one of those over the other, the reverse chronological or most important, at least important?
I don't have a strong preference because it's based on the individual. If I look at it, I can tell you, which I think is better. But I think, if they're all clinical, it's hard to say. And also if your resume is just 1 or 2 pages, you can drive yourself crazy on every little detail of a resume of one thing's better than another. If it's 1 or 2 pages and it's clear, they're not going to miss it, right? They're not going to miss the information. They're going to see it. So don't worry too much about every little detail about that. And so I can always look at it and see. But I'll just go ahead and mention that anyone that has put a resume together, if you want me to go over it with you, I can. What I ask is you just get it as complete as you can, because the more complete you get it, the better I can help you. So we'll have my email again at the end, and probably all of you seen it anyway through all the emails to the listserv and that sort of thing. So I can look at it and give you some feedback. Okay, next please.
Also in the chat, Leah asked, what if you don't have any work or clinical experience yet? Would we have to mention that in the application we plan to apply for?
So you just list what you have, right? Maybe you're involved in activities, like on campus in the pre-med club, or even just being a member of a pre-med club is good to put on there, even if you don't have an active role. So that's when you list other things that you do have, like activities, and of course anything that may be volunteer kind of work, those kinds of things. So as far as would we have to mention that in the application we plan to apply for it. If you're talking about professional school, well, I'm not sure if that's what you mean. Well, you need to have clinical experience before you apply to begin with, right? You know, that you've got to have some good hours. If it's for a job, let's just say a summer, you know, a summer position at Wake Med, then you just list what you do have, and they know you're just getting started, right? If you're applying for a position like that, it's not expected that you already have a lot of experience. So you just develop what you do have on there.
Yeah, and I'll also speak on that. Um, my freshman and sophomore year of college, I don't really have a whole lot of stuff to put on my resume either. So in those situations, a lot of the things that I put were like just volunteer things that I had done. Um, and I guess I try to emphasize the things like within the bullet points and stuff you normally put, the job descriptions. I tried to harness them so that it was applicable to the thing I was applying for. So it's like, oh, hey, like this isn't a clinical experience, this isn't a job, but this is something that I did, and it
Yeah,
is kind of relevant to this thing that I want to do.
yeah. So activities, volunteer, other kind of volunteer, not clinically related. All those things you can be listed. And yes, you're referring to internships. And so if you're first or second year also, then it would be okay to list like maybe some significant things in high school because you haven't had a chance to get many other kinds of things yet. So that would be appropriate. If you have some things in high school you think are very good, just like that physics award, then that would be a good time to keep it on there because that tells them more about you, things that they don't know. Okay. So clinical experience, same thing, the option of reverse chronological order or most important to least important. Include paid or unpaid, it doesn't matter, it's what you did. That's the most important thing, what you want them to know about. Um, one of the things to think about in clinical experience is to consider uh, putting on there how many hours you actually worked or volunteered. That tells them a lot. Um, let's say that you were um, volunteering at a hospital for 3 hours a week, 4 hours a week for 6 months, then that you put it on there. But let's say you have been doing something in a physician's office at the same time. You're doing some kind of medical assistant work in a physician's office or at a medical clinic. And at the same time, you're going to school full time, but you're working 10 to 15 hours a week. That really adds up. So I think it's really helpful to post your hours on there when you send it out. And then of course, keep it up to date because it's constantly evolving. I mean, you could even put on there for the hours when you send it, let's say you're working at a physician's office 15 hours a week and you started there January 2021. You send off your resume March 1st. You could put on there the number of hours you have as of March 1st. But at the same time, you show that you're working at that place continuously, like January 2021 to present. And then under it, 100 hours as of 3/1/21. Something like that. Because the more hours you have, the better, and you want them to know that because they have no way of knowing, how much you have. Of course, the work dates are included on there, just like I mentioned, and again, mention the action verbs. Um, there's a list in the career guide that I referenced to begin with, the NC State career guide. So that's got a whole page of action verbs you can look at. I've used something like that many times over the years. So I'm thinking, well, I don't want to keep saying start with the same word every time. I would look over a list. I used to use one from Boston. I think it was the Boston College Career Center. Somehow I stumbled on a list they had. And it helped me to think of some options so it's not sounding redundant. And let's see, there was a question I think that popped up. if we do an internship that was paid, would we put that in both work and clinical experience? Just one or the other. So if it's clinically related, it would be in the clinical experience category if you have them separate. If the internship is not clinically related, then in the work experience. So it depends on what it is. And again, you can adjust your headings, your categories, so it makes sense, right? Okay, the next one, please. So these are some examples of leadership and activities. I mentioned student clubs of any kind. Volunteer experiences are very helpful to include that. And I put on there volunteer experiences not clinical because you can put the volunteer experiences in the clinical experience category. So again, some examples. And some medical schools really like to see community service, really like to see what the Dean of Admissions, Dr. Bright, from the ECU Brody School of Medicine, was on with the pre-med club in the fall semester, about October or so. And he talked about what they look for at Brody for the pre-med students. And he mentioned that they like to see in the past, there's some leniency now, the mean was between 200 and 500 hours of clinical experience and 200 to 500 hours of volunteer or what he called humanitarian experience. So not clinically related. So all of that is valuable. UNC School of Medicine is another one. They really emphasize that. So keep that in mind that it's really helpful, especially for some schools, to have some community experience, service experience of some kind. Next one, please. So honors and awards, there's many different kinds. There's a few examples. Any questions about this category or the previous one about activities? For honors and awards, excuse me. Okay, next one, research. So it can be any kind of research. Again, it's helpful. We have students who get research working in a faculty member's lab on campus and sometimes off campus, like a summer research position with a company like Pfizer in the Triangle. And some organizations like the NIH and places like that have research internships. So it's all helpful, really good to be sure you include on the resume. All right, next please. And these are some information about different kinds of projects. So I mentioned anything, whether it's class related, where you put extra time and effort into it, longer than a normal assignment. So some obvious examples are senior projects and a thesis, that sort of thing. But it can be anything. And I've known some students that have done some things on their own where they've really had extra, spent a lot of really extra time on something. And sometimes it's just interesting, even though it's not particularly related. It's just interesting to show that they've done something. Again, shows that they've taken the initiative to really learn more about something and that they have some personal interest that they're involved in. So I saw a couple of questions pop up. Is it okay if the research isn't directly medically related, like research in animals? Yes, absolutely yes. And should we list hours in research? No, I think just the period of time that you did. I think more important that the hours in research is more of just a description of what you did. And we always have students that are doing research like at the vet school, for example, that are pre-med. So it's good to have on there. Does anybody have any projects, on personal projects, they spend a lot of time on something just because they enjoy it? Okay, if you do, consider putting it on there. Okay, next one, please. So skills, clinical, of course, put on there, whatever it may be. And it can be, some of it can be on the job training. It's not necessarily a certification that you get. Languages are always good to put on there, whatever they may be. Mohammed told me he speaks another language. Remind me, Mohammed, what is it?
Urdu and Hindi.
Yeah. So whatever it is, it's really helpful, really beneficial to know some other languages. And then sometimes people put computer skills on there as well, just to show they know all the basics. Sometimes it's more advanced. Sometimes it's on the job. Maybe somebody got a scribe position at, we've had some scribes that, for example, I think at the Urban Ministries Medical Clinic, and they learn on the job, like electronic health records. They work with it every day. So that's good to have it on there. And again, that's a valuable experience that can really help you out when you go for another position potentially. Next one, please. Oh, and for languages, I put fluent or proficient. Sometimes people don't like to put just list Spanish or other languages because they're not fluent, but they are proficient, so they feel more comfortable putting on there. They don't want to feel like they're misleading someone. And sometimes people don't know if they're proficient or not. For example, I'll come back to this project question, but sometimes people aren't sure if they feel like they meet the criteria for proficient or something, or something like that. And so sometimes I'll ask them, well, let's say you're in the office with me, somebody walks up to the door, only speaks Spanish, and you know Spanish, and they ask directions to your favorite restaurant downtown. Could you give them directions? So that's one way to think of it. Are you conversational enough that you could help someone like that? And if you can, then you can put proficient on there. You don't have to say that, you don't have to be an expert, because it shows you have some knowledge. Okay, let me go back to the question. I did a senior project before I graduated from my early college. Do you think that I should include that on my resume or no? It's about illiteracy in my local county. So before I graduated from my early college, so I'm not quite sure when that is. Were you also in high school at the same time, maybe? So I think that would be good to put on there, because also you graduated 2020 from high school. So if you did, then definitely put that on there. Yes, from there and community college. So yeah, I think that's good. I think that's a really good project, and it clearly shows some depth on an important topic. Clearly, you would have learned a lot doing something like that. That's a senior project. Okay. So these are some different kinds of things people get involved in. Maybe they're interesting on here. I'll come back to that question. So these are just some examples. I had a pre-dental student that was had played jazz piano for some years, took a class at NC State, maybe even still had some instruction, but it was something interesting and different. She spent a lot of time on, and it was an icebreaker. Sometimes you start talking to somebody in an interview, they say, "Oh, this is what I did." I said, "Oh, that's interesting. I like jazz. Tell me some people that you like who've influenced you." So it's just kind of an icebreaker. There's lots of clubs on campus people get involved in. It can be anything: calligraphy, ballroom dancing, juggling. It doesn't matter. It's just something that can be interesting. You spent some time on it. Again, it shows you're involved in things. You're have personal interests, and it can also help with stress to have something like this, where you spend some time on something else, because you spend so much time studying and working. It's good to have some something else that you're involved in. And medical schools really like to see that people have a way of dealing with stress that's productive, because obviously it is stressful as an undergraduate, and then it just ramps up when you get into medical school. Do I put it before honors and activities? It's kind of a toss up. Just use your judgment. It's not significant one way or the other. So just use your judgment, which ones you think is most important. Okay, that may be the last, the next one, yeah, has my email again. So you can always email me again later with any specific questions if you want to. And again, I'm glad to help you with your resume if you want. Like I said, get it as good as you can, and then we'll look it over. Now let's look at a couple of examples. Mohammed, do you want to show the first example I sent you?
Yeah, sure.
So this is a student, I just changed the name and that sort of thing, but a student from state that I used her resume. And so look how neat and clear it is, right? She's got her name and contact information at the top. And then look at the categories: education, experience. So she just has one experience. She doesn't have it broken up to clinical or just general work experience. But taking a quick glance at it, they're all clinical things that she's listed. But look at the little bit larger letters on the heading. She still has in bold the name of the place where she worked or volunteered. And another thing, if you look closely, in italics, she has volunteer. So it stands out, her position there stands out a little bit more. So I think this is a really nicely organized resume. It goes to 2 pages. Remember, not more than 2. In fact, I was working with a student. To begin with, it was 3 pages. And I saw right away that she could get it down. She could get it down to 2. And so I worked with her to get it down to 2. And it's really a nice looking resume. So then she has research. She has presentations because she has some significant research, awards and certificates, membership, languages. She used conversational instead of proficient. That's just as good. So going back up to the first page and looking at her experience, she's got, 3 lines or so on each category, and they're all clinically related. She started with action verbs: conducted, called, participated, provided, and just a good basic description. And then if someone wants to know more about these things, well, then you've got their interest, you've given the good basic information. Then when they interview you, then they say, oh, well, tell me more about Atrium Health and what you did there. So that's when you'll get a chance to expand on it. So I think it's nicely balanced. The information that she has, good that she has the leadership, shows she was co-vice president of one organization and then treasurer of another. Again, anything where you take an active role. And if you don't even have an active role, it still can be under activities, that if you're in an organization like the Pre-Med Club. So if you scroll down to the second page again, so I think this is a really good resume. It's easy to read, touches on the main things, well organized, gives me all the basic stuff I want to know about this student. Is there any questions about this resume?
I actually had a question.
Yep.
So, like, it's a good resume and all, but also, like, I've heard a lot about how like your resume like has to be 1 page. So like, is that something that you should keep in mind when you're making your resume? Or
If you can, it's better. It really, one or two is okay. There is um, no one's going to hold against you if it goes to 2 pages because you've got some content you don't want to leave off. You just can't fit it onto one. So if you can get it to one, I think it's better, but not if you have to cut something out that's helpful.
okay.
And again, that's something I can help with. Um, should a resume include references, contacts they could reach out to? Usually no, usually not. But if you've got room for it, let's say your resume is a page and a half, you've got another half a page, and you really want to list your references, their name, uh, maybe their position, maybe they were a physician in an office or someone at a medical clinic, that kind of a thing, whatever it may be. Then it's fine. Include it on there. It's fine. Um, so that's the general guide. Most of the time people do not. If you've got room for it anyway, and you think it's really helpful and really valuable that you would really like for them to contact your references, then put it on there. Like that could help your chances that they would by putting it right up there up front. Any other questions about this? She put her GPA on there. Of course, her GPA is strong. Had 1 year at Wingate, so didn't, that's all she needs. Doesn't need to list the classes or anything like that. Just needs to show the date she was there. That's all I need to know. Okay, Mohammed, you want to go to the second one?
Yeah, sure. Um,
Okay, so this is a second resume that I reworked. A student I know sent me his resume and I reworked it. This was Mohammed's resume, but I really changed it, and I just made up the GPA. I don't know what Mohammed's GPA is. I just made that up. But I reworked it in a way that I thought made more sense. But again, it's clear and organized. It's a little like there's a little bit more white space on this than there was on the previous one, isn't there? So, if you scroll down to the second page, Mohammed, I think it's possible that this could get into 1 page.
mhm.
If you scroll back up, there's always ways to add more lines. I'll just give you a couple of examples. So we have the name of Chris Pre-Health, and then you have the address, email, and phone number. Well, if you really needed the space, you could put under Chris Pre-Health, you could put all the rest on one line. You could just spread it out going across. Address, email, phone number. That would probably save at least one line anyway. Then under education, you wouldn't have to have a space in between the Bachelor of Science and the minor. You could not even have a space underneath North Carolina State, because it's already in bold. It's already going to be set off. So that saves a couple lines there. So there's always ways to save lines. If you look down under the research experience, the lines, the June to August wouldn't quite fit on the line. You could just figure out some way to make that a little bit shorter, so it's all on one line. Some ideas could be, let's see, you could abbreviate assistant, ASST period. For the dates, you could, instead of putting June to August, you could put 06 to whatever it is, 08. And then do that with all the other ones too, to be consistent. So anyway, and then go down but one of the things that'll make this a challenge is that Mohammed had at the bottom leadership and activities pre-med club, but no description. Well, I know Mohammed has been an active co-president and currently president. He's been actively involved in organizing things, speakers, all kinds of things. The pre-med club, and I've told Mohammed and Ryan last semester, they did a really good job with the speakers that they brought in last semester. I thought they were really good. So I think he is selling himself short to not put a description of all the things he's been doing as pre-med. You can be the president of the pre-med club and maybe not do too much, or you can take an active role. And if you don't tell me, how do I know?
All right.
And that can be true of anything. You can be the president of the bicycle club and not have any description under it. Well, maybe the president of the bicycle club didn't do much. Maybe they just got together, once a month for a bicycle ride. There was no structure to it. They just, if you wanted to, show up on the first Saturday of the month at 9 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe the president of the bicycle club organized rides, once a month, brought in speakers to speak to the club. Maybe even did some fundraising to raise some money for something. All those kinds of things should be in there. It is really good and really helpful. So if we go down to the STEM Journal Club, co-founder and co-president, there's a good description. That's my point right there. How helpful would it be if you have the STEM Journal Club with no description whatsoever? Well, it's good, but it doesn't tell me much. Right? So same thing there. And then for the biological sciences, transfer student membership, the peer mentor, maybe a brief description. I don't know. What do you think, Mohammed? Do you think there'd be something to put there?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I don't know that it's necessarily as extensive as the STEM Journal Club. Maybe not 4 lines. It's up to you.
Right.
But I would put something there. And with those descriptions, you very well may need to go to 2 pages. So put it on there. Give me some good information to help me to get a better understanding of what you've been doing, because it's all good stuff. Then honors and certifications, that's really good as well. So if you want to scroll back up, it's well organized, good headings, bold, underline, dates, all those kinds of things. Mohammed used bullets on his descriptions there. A lot of people do that. It's optional if you want. Either way, it's good as long as it's clear, well organized, doesn't matter. The bullets do set it off a little bit more, I think, since the lines are consecutive.
Yeah.
So for the scribe position you had, what kind of training did you get there, for example, Mohammed?
We just had training sessions before we started doing it on our own. So like we would be in a classroom with like an actual textbook and stuff, just like reviewing terminology, just making sure we knew everything.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure we had to take an exam.
Was there an electronic system that you had to learn to use?
Yeah.
Did it have a name?
I don't remember it anymore, but obviously like it was within the Atrium Health hospital system, so it was like this huge system.
Yeah.
I just can't remember.
Yeah, it's kind of understood, right, that if you're a scribe, that you've used their electronic system.
Right.
But you could, mention that as well, even if there's not. You could use a generic name even if there's not a specific.
Okay.
So these are two good examples, a little bit different. For Mohammed, he has the name of clinical experience on there. And both of the things are clinically related. So I think that's a more specific heading than just experience. I think that's better. That tells me more right away. Yeah. This is clinical experience, not just experience of all kinds. So what questions do you have? I've mentioned the main points, two good resumes, examples to look at and consider. I mentioned the career guide that you can search and see more examples and get ideas. And as you can see, there's room for variety on each one. And it doesn't matter as long as it's clear of what information you're providing to the employer or to the professional school.
All right, so do we have any questions for Dr. Easterlin? You can type them in the chat or you can just turn on your mic. Maggie has a question. When applying to a research position, is it helpful to have a relevant coursework section to show what lab techniques, etc. you've learned?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? If you're applying to research and you've got some relevant coursework that you can list some lab techniques and information, that sort of thing, then I think that would be very good and very helpful. You know, relevant coursework is not that necessarily that important unless, but the guideline is, unless it's helpful and important for them to know how far along you are, as well as some specific content. So if someone using a resume to apply to professional school, you don't need a relevant coursework section, right? You're going to be providing transcripts anyway. But maybe you've just completed 2 years at state, and you've got some good stuff that helps you to be qualified for a research position, internship, whatever, then yeah, list it. List it.
I have a question, but it's not necessarily related to the resume. It's more just about medical school.
Okay.
What do you think? Because I'm gonna apply to do a certification this summer for like ENT or something like that. Do you think that one of them is better than the other, like medical assistant or CNA, or which do you think are like the best for medical school?
Well, they're all really good and really helpful. And for EMT, there are less emergency positions than there are just medical assistant or CNA, but still those skills help you to get something else. But there's only so many emergency kinds of positions you can get that's directly related, but still that training is very valuable and very helpful. So you may want to look at, so that's some general guidelines. You may want to look at positions that I've mentioned in the past through the listserv, what they look for, whether it's a medical assistant position or a CNA, that sort of thing. So, but in general, the CNA and the medical assistant is usually closer to the more positions that are out there. But I don't want to, but you also should use whatever you're really interested in. If you're really interested in emergency medicine, then that's more reason to do it. The medical schools want you to pursue what you're really interested in, what you have a passion about, and not do something just because somebody else thinks it's a good idea.
Thank you. Sorry.
I'll add on to that is that like Dr. Easterlin said, like EMT jobs are pretty hard to come by. I think CNA jobs, they're easier to come by, but honestly, like a lot of people I talk to that do CNA jobs, they don't necessarily like it a whole lot. So something that I guess you want to find out what you're comfortable with. Like for me, like you saw, I did phlebotomy. To me, I thought it was a pretty good balance of, oh, this is something that is relatively easy to find experience in, and at the same time, it's not necessarily like how it would be with CNA stuff. So you want to find something like that. And honestly, more important than anything is that like you don't want to get a certification and then not use it. I feel like that's like the worst possible thing you can do.
Yeah, and what they'll say is, it's great to get the certification, but it doesn't mean that much if you didn't use it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have one little bit of input on that. So I have my CNA and I've worked with that, but I would just encourage you, when you're looking at all of the options, to just think about what's also going to be feasible with school. So if you're doing shift work versus like maybe something that's a little more flexible, I would just look into those things and think about that as well.
And clinical experience is great, but if it's impacting your grades, like then it's not worth it.
Did you feel like the phlebotomy was like a good balance of like, were you still able to like do that and get your school work done and stuff?
I thought it was for me, definitely. Like for the Mariam Clinic stuff, that was once a week on Sundays. So like that's consistent experience, but like it's on a Sunday. Like I'm not really doing anything else on a Sunday. So like that worked out for me very well.
Did you do the scribe at the same time or like later?
No, I
Or
did
both?
driving like my freshman slash sophomore year, and then I got the certification and I did phlebotomy stuff my junior, senior year until COVID happened.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Let me answer this last question, and I need to stop. My advisor in my sophomore year was a great resource for med school. She moved on. Who can I keep in contact with that could help me? Well, depending on what it is, just send me an email. Depending on what it is, the academic advisor, their expertise is in the course planning and the courses you need to take. And then obviously you need to look at medical schools to see what courses you need to get into UNC and ECU and Wake Forest and where else it might be. Um, and then things that are not so much about that, just send me an email and then I can help you sort. Either I help you or I help you figure out what you need to know. So if you, I need to leave, but Mohammed, if you want to put my email up there again, people can contact me anytime and just send me an email and I'll respond.
All right, thank you, Dr. Easterlin, for your time.
Okay. Okay, you bet.
And I'll wrap up.
All
But
right.
thank you
Take
so much
care.
for coming. Yep, you too.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Bye. All right, so I'll just pull up Dr. Easterlin's thing real quick. That's his email address. Most of the time, you guys are probably on his listserv. If you're not, you should really hop on it. You get a lot of information about opportunities and stuff from it. But if you want to get on the listserv, if you need to email him about anything, right there, breaster@ncsu.edu. And I'm gonna send out the PowerPoint. Put this on YouTube, and send out the link for that. Before we go, we have our T-shirt giveaway. Callie, if you wanna do your thing.
Yeah, so all I did was use the attendance from today's meeting, and we have 4 shirts left, so we'll give away 3 more at the next 3 meetings. But today's winner is Samuel. So if you can just, in the chat, just send me what size. We have 2 large, 2 medium left, and put your email, and we'll be in touch with you about getting that to you.
All right, awesome. Do we have any last questions? All right, we'll go ahead and wrap it up then. Thanks everybody for coming. Our next meeting is gonna be 2 weeks from now, February 24th at 4 o'clock. We're gonna have Dr. Overcash. She's an OBGYN in the DC area, so she'll be coming to speak with us. I'll send out more details about that when the date gets closer. If you have any questions for me, you can email me at mscon3@ncsu.edu. Can you show the QR code? Yeah, there's the QR code. But if you have any questions for me or anything like that, don't hesitate to email me. But thanks everybody for coming. See you.
I have one more question if I could ask you really quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so for the, like you were saying, the scribe versus the phlebotomy, like which certification